My eldest daughter, Sarah, told me that if I dared to drag my mistake from my second marriage to her wedding, I could forget she even existed. But the most devastating part happened 10 minutes later when I found my 8-year-old son, Leo, standing right behind the door. He had heard every single word, and now he's huddled in the corner of his room, sobbing because he is convinced I'm hiding him from the world because I'm ashamed of him. This whole nightmare started exactly 3 weeks ago when that invitation showed up in the mailbox. Something that was supposed to be a symbol of our reconciliation, but instead turned into a detonator that blew what was left of my family to pieces. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 10 years, I've been living in a literal minefield, trying to balance between a past and a present that refused to coexist, caught between a daughter who never forgave me for the divorce and my son, Leo, who hasn't done anything wrong except be born into the wrong set of circumstances. Sarah has always been difficult, but I genuinely thought her upcoming wedding to Marcus would soften her heart, especially since she asked me to walk her down the aisle, a moment I was willing to pay any price for. Yet when I pulled that card out of the envelope, I saw only my name, with no mention of my wife, Ellen, or my son, even though the wedding is supposed to be a family-friendly event with kids from the groom's side attending. When I called her to clarify this, I honestly expected a formal explanation or maybe a technical error with the printer, but Sarah's voice on the other end was like a sheet of ice, and she went straight to the point without giving me a single second to talk about how her brother might feel. She told me it was her day, her perfect moment, and she wasn't going to spend it looking at the result of my infidelity. Despite the fact that I didn't even meet Ellen until 2 years after the legal separation from her mother. My ex-wife, Claire, has spent years pouring poison into Sarah's ears, painting me as a traitor and Leo as the living symbol of their family's collapse. And now, after all this time, that poison has finally paralyzed her ability to be rational. I tried to explain to her that Leo worships his big sister, that he keeps an old photo of her on his nightstand and asks me every summer when she's finally going to come visit us. But Sarah just laughed into the phone and called my words a cheap manipulation tactic. The tension in the house started building the second I hung up that first time, because Ellen saw the look on my face and immediately knew something was wrong, and Leo, who has this terrifyingly sharp intuition for an 8-year-old, started asking why I looked so sad. I made the fatal mistake of deciding to have one last final talk with Sarah while Leo was supposedly busy playing video games in his room, and I didn't notice that he had come out to get a glass of juice and stopped in the hallway. At that exact moment, Sarah was screaming into the phone that the very thought of her friends seeing that kid made her sick to her stomach, and she told me I had to choose who mattered more, my real daughter or that accidental boy. When I pressed end and turned around, Leo was standing 2 feet away from me, his eyes wide with a kind of shock I hope no other parent ever has to see, and he was clutching a plastic cup that slowly slipped through his fingers and hit the floor. He didn't scream, he didn't throw a tantrum, he just asked in this tiny, shaking voice, "Dad, are you really hiding me because I'm ugly?" Those words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could, because I realized that in a single evening, I had managed to betray both of my children just by trying to be the good guy who kept everyone happy. Now I have exactly 1 month until the wedding, and this month is turning into a slow descent into a personal hell where every move I make only deepens the wound. Ellen, once she found out what happened and saw the state Leo was in, packed a bag for the first time in our marriage and took him to her sister's house, because she says she can't forgive me for not hanging up the phone the second Sarah insulted our son. I'm left in a silent house with that wedding invitation sitting on the kitchen table like a curse, and the silence here is so heavy I can almost feel it pressing against my chest. My phone is blowing up with messages from Claire's relatives calling me selfish, and Sarah just sent a text saying that if I don't confirm my attendance without the baggage by the end of the week, she's cutting me out of her life for good and telling everyone I skipped her wedding over money. I'm trapped in a cage I built myself by indulging her whims for years, and as I sit here in the dark looking at the calendar, I realize that whatever I choose, I'm going to lose a child, and I don't know how I'm supposed to survive the next 30 days. It is now 24 days before the wedding, and the silence in this house has become a physical weight that I carry from room to room, especially when I walk past Leo's bedroom and see his half-finished Lego castle on the floor, the one we promised to finish together before the big day. I spent the last 3 nights sleeping on the sofa because the master bedroom feels too empty without Ellen's breathing, and every time my phone vibrates, I feel a surge of adrenaline that quickly turns into a sickening drop in my stomach when I see it's just another automated notification from my bank. I opened the shared wedding spreadsheet this morning, the one Sarah and Marcus gave me access to so I could track the investments. And I sat there for 2 hours staring at the total column, which currently sits at $68,000, nearly all of which has come out of my savings account over the last 6 months. I am paying for a luxury event where my own son is treated like a shameful secret that needs to be locked away in a basement. And the realization that I am financing my own family's humiliation is starting to make me feel physically ill every time I swallow. I tried to call Ellen again yesterday, but she didn't pick up, sending me a short text saying that Leo is having nightmares and keeps asking if he did something wrong to make his sister hate him so much. He's 8, and instead of thinking about 3rd grade math or his soccer practice, he is wondering if his existence is an embarrassment to the people who are supposed to love him, and I am the one who let him hear that conversation. I went to the grocery store to get some basic supplies, and I ran into Marcus, Sarah's fiancé, in the parking lot. He looked uncomfortable the moment he saw me, shifting his weight and looking at his watch like he was counting the seconds until he could escape. I asked him if he knew about the ultimatum Sarah gave me, and he sighed, telling me that he doesn't want to get involved in family drama, but that Sarah is very stressed and just wants everything to be perfect for the photos. He actually said that he mentioned the photos as if a digital image of a smiling bride is more important than the mental health of a young boy who shares my blood, and then he added that maybe it would be easier for everyone if I just complied for one day to keep the peace. I stood there in the rain, watching him drive off in the new SUV that I helped them with the down payment for, and I realized that I've spent the last decade trying to buy my way back into Sarah's heart, thinking that if I was generous enough, she would eventually stop seeing me as the man who left her mother. But the money hasn't bought me love. It has only bought me a front row seat to my own execution as a father, and the more I give, the more she demands, as if she is trying to see exactly how much I will sacrifice before I finally break. When I got home, there was a message from my ex-wife, Claire, on my landline. She rarely calls the house, and her voice was that specific tone of calm triumph that she always uses when she knows she has the upper hand. She told me that Sarah is distraught, that I am choosing a child of a mistress over her wedding, and that if I don't show up alone, she will make sure every relative on her side of the family knows that I abandoned my firstborn twice. I sat at my kitchen table and started looking through old bank statements from the years following the divorce, seeing the thousands of dollars in extra alimony and the private school tuitions I paid without question, all while Ellen and I lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment to save for Leo's future. I've been trying to make up for a guilt that was planted in me by a woman who couldn't accept that our marriage ended because we were miserable, not because I was a villain, and I've allowed that guilt to dictate how I treat my second family. I looked at the guest list again and noticed that Marcus's nephews, who are 6 and 9, are listed as ring bearers, which means the no children rule Sarah tried to use as a fallback earlier was a blatant lie designed specifically to exclude Leo. The pressure is mounting because the caterers and the venue need the final headcount and the final payment of $15,000 by Friday, and Sarah has been calling me every hour now, her tone shifting from aggressive to pleading, telling me how much she needs me there to walk her down the aisle. She hasn't mentioned Leo once since that night, acting as if the conversation never happened or as if he doesn't exist, which is a level of coldness that I didn't think she was capable of. I feel like I am being pulled apart by 2 different lives, and the 1 month I have to fix this is disappearing day by day, leaving me with no good options and a growing sense of dread that no matter what I do, I will be the villain in someone's story. I haven't told Ellen about the money yet, or about how much I've really spent on this wedding, because I'm afraid she'll see it as me choosing Sarah over our son's college fund. And the truth is, I'm afraid she's right. I'm sitting here in the dark, watching the clock on the microwave tick toward midnight, knowing that tomorrow I have to make a choice that will either end my relationship with my daughter or permanently break the trust of my son and my wife. It is now exactly 12 days before the wedding, and the air in my life has become so toxic that I can barely breathe without feeling like I'm suffocating on my own mistakes. Today was the deadline for the final $15,000 payment to the venue, and my phone has been vibrating on the kitchen counter since 6 in the morning with messages from Sarah, Marcus, and even my ex-wife, Claire. But the money isn't even the biggest problem anymore. The real nightmare started when I drove over to Ellen's sister's house to try and talk to my son, hoping to explain things before the damage became permanent. I found Leo sitting on the back porch, staring at a dead beetle on the ground, and when I sat down next to him, he didn't even look up or acknowledge I was there. I tried to tell him that I love him, that he is the most important thing in my life, but he just turned his head and asked me why I told Sarah he couldn't come because he was too loud. My heart stopped because I never said those words, but it turns out Sarah had sent a voice note to Ellen's sister, knowing it would get back to Leo, saying that, "Dad agrees it's better if you stay home, so you don't ruin the photos with your outbursts." She is systematically dismantling my relationship with my son to get what she wants, and she's using my silence as her primary weapon. I went back to my car and called Sarah, and for the first time in years, I didn't hold back. I told her that she was being cruel, and that I wouldn't pay the final balance until she called Leo and apologized for the lies. She didn't cry, she didn't apologize. She just told me that if the money isn't in the venue's account by 5 p.m., she will post a status on Facebook telling the entire family that I am financially abusing her and trying to ruin her wedding because I'm a bitter, middle-aged man. She then told me that Marcus's family has already heard that I'm ashamed of Leo's behavior, and that's why I'm keeping him away, effectively shifting the entire blame for her exclusionary rules onto my shoulders. I feel like I am being hunted by my own daughter, and the financial pressure is becoming a noose around my neck because that $15,000 represents the last of the liquid cash I had set aside for our home renovations. When I got back home, Ellen was waiting for me in the driveway, and she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She didn't even let me get out of the car before she handed me a folder. It was a printout of the wedding's digital itinerary that Marcus had accidentally sent to a group chat she was still in, and it listed every single child in the groom's family by name for the family and trans section. Leo's name was the only one missing from the entire extended family list, confirming that this wasn't about a no-kids policy or wedding stress, but a deliberate, surgical removal of my son from our family history. Ellen told me that she is filing for a legal separation if I go to that wedding alone, and she wasn't yelling. She was calm, which is 1,000 times worse because it means she's already made up her mind. She said she won't raise Leo in a house where his father allows him to be treated like a second-class citizen or a shameful mistake. And she told me that every dollar I've sent to Sarah over the last month feels like a bribe I'm paying to be allowed to betray my own son. I tried to explain that I'm just trying to keep the peace, that I don't want to lose Sarah forever, but Ellen just looked at me with pity and said, "You already lost her. You're just too scared to admit you're paying for the privilege of being hated." By 4 p.m., the pressure became unbearable. The venue coordinator called me directly, saying that if the wire transfer wasn't confirmed in 60 minutes, they would release the date to a couple on the waiting list. Sarah started sending me photos of her in her wedding dress, crying, followed by a text from Marcus saying that I am destroying a young woman's dreams over a grudge. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught between the threat of losing my marriage and the threat of my daughter's public character assassination of me. I ended up making the payment, but I did it with a shaking hand and a sense of self-loathing so strong I wanted to throw up, and the second the confirmation went through, Sarah's tone changed instantly. She sent a heart emoji and told me she knew I would do the right thing. But she still didn't mention Leo, and she still hasn't retracted the lies she told him. Tonight, I am sitting in a house that no longer feels like a home, surrounded by the ghosts of a family that is breaking apart in real time. Leo won't take my calls. Ellen is staying at her sister's indefinitely, and I am $15,000 poorer for a wedding that I now dread more than anything in the world. I realize today that I haven't just been a peacekeeper. I've been a coward who thought money could fix a hole in someone's soul, and now that hole is swallowing everything I love. The wedding is in 12 days, and the tension in my chest is so tight I can't even take a full breath. I have to find a way to fix this, but every path I take seems to lead to a cliff. I'm starting to realize that the right thing Sarah talked about might be the biggest mistake of my entire life. And the clock is ticking down to a day that will either be a celebration of a new marriage or the official funeral of my family. I found a secondary, hidden folder in the shared wedding drive 5 days ago, and it wasn't just a list of guest names or seating charts. It was a detailed, minute-by-minute script for a surprise tribute to resilience that Sarah and Claire are planning to stage right after I walk her down the aisle, and it is designed to publicly crucify my reputation in front of everyone I've ever known. The document, which was accidentally left in a folder titled Final Vows, Do Not Open, contains a speech written by my ex-wife, Claire, that Sarah is supposed to read. It describes in agonizing, fabricated detail how I abandoned them in a time of need, how I funded a secret life with Ellen while they starved, which is a blatant lie, considering I gave Claire the house and 60% of my income for years. And it ends with Sarah officially announcing that she is changing her last name back to Claire's maiden name to sever the final tie to a man who values a mistake over his firstborn. I sat in my dark living room staring at the screen of my laptop for 3 hours, scrolling through the comments Marcus had left on the draft. He didn't try to stop her. Instead, he suggested adding a line about how my presence at the wedding was bought and paid for as a form of reparations for my sins. They have been planning this for months, using my guilt and my desire for reconciliation as a financial pipeline to fund a celebration that is actually a trap. But the worst part, the part that makes my blood feel like it's turning into lead, is a series of screenshots of messages between Sarah and her mother where they laugh about how easy it was to get the extra $15,000 out of me by using Leo as a pawn. Sarah literally wrote, "He's so desperate for me to love him that he'll pay for his own execution. Once the check clears for the honeymoon, we can finally tell him the truth and cut him off for good. The moral dilemma I'm facing now is so sharp it's cutting me in half. If I reveal I know the truth and cancel everything now, I confirm every lie they've ever told about me being a controlling, vindictive man who ruins everything. If I go through with it and walk her down that aisle, I am knowingly participating in my own public humiliation and, more importantly, I am continuing to betray Ellen and Leo by financing a woman who is actively trying to destroy us. I called the bank this morning to see if the $15,000 wire could be reversed, and the clerk told me it was already processed and settled into the venue's account, but that the honeymoon fund payment of $10,000 is still pending for Monday. I drove to Ellen's sister's house without calling first because I couldn't bear to be alone with this information anymore. When I arrived, Ellen wouldn't let me in at first, but when she saw my face, when she saw that I had finally, truly broken, she stepped aside. I showed her the script. I showed her the messages where Sarah laughed about Leo's nightmares. Ellen didn't scream. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just started crying. Not for me, but for the fact that we had allowed this poison to stay in our lives for so long. She told me that Leo has started refusing to leave his room because he thinks people in the street can see that he's the kid his dad is ashamed of. And hearing that made something inside me finally snap. The man who wanted to keep the peace died in that moment, replaced by a father who realizes that you cannot negotiate with people who want to see you bleed. The twist in all of this is that Marcus called me an hour after I left Ellen's, sounding panicked. He told me that Claire had accidentally told him that the wedding venue isn't actually paid up for the full weekend, and that there's an outstanding balance of another $5,000 that needs to be covered immediately or the doors will be locked. It was a lie. I had the receipts in front of me from the venue coordinator showing a zero balance. They are trying to squeeze every last cent out of me before the final blow on Saturday. Marcus sounded so convincing, so worried about Sarah's happiness. But all I could hear was the sound of a predator closing in for the kill. I told him I'd see what I could do and hung up. I have 4 days left until the wedding. I have the power to call the venue, the caterer, and the florist, all of whom I paid directly, and cancel the entire event for a partial refund, or I can show up and let the script play out but with a different ending than the one they've written. My sister, who has always hated Claire, told me I should just walk away and let them arrive at an empty hall, but that feels too easy for them. They would just use it as more fuel for their victim narrative. Tonight, I'm looking at a photo of Sarah when she was 5, sitting on my shoulders, and I'm trying to find a trace of that little girl in the woman who is currently planning to destroy me for sport. She isn't there anymore. I've realized that I haven't been fighting to save a relationship. I've been fighting to save a ghost. The question isn't whether I should go to the wedding anymore. The question is how I can end this in a way that protects Leo's future and finally puts an end to the decade of psychological warfare Claire has waged through our daughter. I have one final move to make, and it involves the honeymoon fund and the secret guest list. But the consequences will be permanent. I am standing on the edge of a cliff, and for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of the fall. I'm just waiting for the right moment to jump. I stood at the back of the church with Sarah's hand resting on my arm, feeling the artificial silk of her sleeve against my skin and the heavy weight of a flash drive in my pocket that contained every recorded lie, every screenshot, and every bit of evidence of the financial and emotional trap she had set for me. The music started, that standard, soaring processional that is supposed to signify a new beginning. But as I looked at the back of my daughter's head, I realized I wasn't walking her toward her future. I was escorting her to the definitive end of our relationship. I had made my move 48 hours earlier when I called the bank and the travel agency to cancel the $10,000 honeymoon fund and the down payment for Marcus's SUV, redirecting every cent into a locked trust fund for Leo that neither I nor Sarah can touch for 10 years. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to see the masks slip in real time, in front of the audience they had so carefully curated for my destruction. As we reached the front of the aisle, I saw the first tremor of the earthquake I had prepared. In the very front row, sitting where the family of the bride should be, were Ellen and Leo. Leo was wearing a small navy suit, his hair combed flat, looking up at the altar with a mixture of fear and hope that broke my heart into a million pieces. The look on Sarah's face when she saw them wasn't one of bridal joy or even surprise. It was pure, unadulterated rage, a momentary snarl that she quickly masked with a fake, trembling smile for the photographers. Beside her, Claire turned white as a sheet, her eyes darting to me with a look that asked if I had finally lost my mind. I didn't say a word. I simply kissed Sarah's cheek. It felt like kissing a statue. Handed her over to Marcus, and took my seat next to my son. I put my hand on Leo's shoulder, and I felt him stop shaking for the first time in 3 weeks. The ceremony was a blur of hollow words and expensive traditions, but the real climax came at the reception. We were 40 minutes into the dinner when Sarah stood up for her tribute to resilience. The room went quiet, and Marcus leaned back with a smug expression, clearly waiting for the moment I would be publicly humiliated. Sarah started reading from her script, her voice cracking with practiced emotion as she spoke about difficult choices and the pain of being a second priority. But she stopped mid-sentence when she realized that the slideshow playing on the massive screens behind her wasn't the montage of childhood photos she had prepared. It was a rotating carousel of the screenshots I had found. Her messages about me being a financial pipeline, her jokes about Leo's nightmares, and the spreadsheet showing exactly where my $60,000 had gone. I had given the AV technician $500 and the flash drive an hour before the wedding started, telling him it was a surprise tribute from the father of the bride. The silence that fell over the room was so thick you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Sarah turned around, her face twisting in a way that no camera could make beautiful, as her own words about getting the check before cutting him off glowed in giant letters behind her. Marcus jumped up, screaming at the technician to turn it off, but the damage was done. The perfect audience, the wealthy friends, the groom's judgmental family, the aunts and uncles, all sat in stunned silence, staring at the evidence of a calculated, cold-blooded grift. I stood up, took Leo's hand, and walked toward the head table. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just laid the final printed receipts for the venue on the table in front of Sarah. I told her that the wedding was fully paid for, as I had promised, but that the honeymoon, the car, and the extra $5,000 they had tried to scam out of me yesterday were gone, invested in the brother she had spent months trying to erase. I told her that I was done being a bank, and I was done being a villain in a story she and her mother had written before I even had a chance to speak. Claire tried to start a screaming match, calling me a monster for ruining her daughter's day, but I just looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no regret, just a profound sense of relief that I was finally breathing clean air. We walked out of that hall while the first whispers of the scandal were starting to ripple through the tables. As we reached the parking lot, Leo looked up at me and asked if we were going home now. I told him we were going to the beach for a few days, just the 3 of us, and that he never had to worry about being a secret ever again. He smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes, and in that moment, the $60,000 I had lost felt like a bargain. It was the price of my freedom and the price of my son's dignity. It's been a week since the wedding. Sarah has sent 43 messages, ranging from death threats to begging for the honeymoon money back, claiming that Marcus's family is looking at them differently now and that they are in debt before their marriage even begins. I haven't replied to any of them. I've blocked Claire on everything. I'm sitting on a porch now, watching Leo and Ellen walk along the shoreline, And I realized that family isn't something you can buy or something you should have to negotiate for. I spent 10 years trying to bridge a gap that the other person was busy widening, and I almost lost the people who actually loved me in the process. I don't know if Sarah and I will ever speak again, and for the first time in my life, I'm okay with that. Some bridges aren't worth crossing, and some fires are necessary to see who is actually standing in the dark with you. I lost a daughter that night, but I finally became a father to my son, and as I watched the waves come in, I realized that the silence isn't heavy anymore. It's just quiet.